I've taught this material for several years. I'm going somewhere with this. The longest I've taught it over is this full semester, so 3.5, 4 months. And the other day I taught it in 45 minutes. And so I've got a whole spectrum. And so what I want to do is spend a few weeks talking about it, get us to about Thanksgiving-ish time, and then see how we do after that, see if we want to keep meeting, maybe take a break. And that's what I'm thinking. And so I'm saying that to say we could go as deep as you want or shallow and so forth. What I was thinking is I want us to have more of a conversation. So I want to teach, but also we converse. And instead of this just being simply about why we know Christianity is true, which I want to do that, if you have questions about maybe a question that's related but not really related, I want to chase that rabbit for a little bit so that we get understanding. If you have questions about how do I address this to an atheist or a skeptic, or I got a cousin who's always questioning about this, what would you say to that? If that's kind of related, let's go there for a little bit. And so I'm not trying to shut down any kind of, if it's related at all to explaining Christianity or understanding it, let's explore it. And I don't want you to feel this is, sometimes I've done it, it's very formal. I've got PowerPoint, believe me, I've got tons of PowerPoints. I thought, and I'm going to do some of that probably at some point, or I might give you handouts. I just want to be a little more informal so it's not at all intimidating if I can help that. So that's my second big point. My third big point is it is okay to ask questions. It's okay, okay? It's just okay. It's okay. So please, and you can set people free if you ask that question you thought was so dumb, and four other people go, I wonder the same thing. So ask it. Theism. That comes from the Greek word theos. It looks like this in Greek if you really want to know, which you probably don't. But theos, it looks like T-H-E-O-S. The word, the male name Theo, remember the Huxtables? Yeah. Everybody knows that, right? Theo, literally, his name meant God. Because theos means God. Theology means a word or study about God. So theism, your ism is from your Latin ending, so that means this is the belief that there is you might say, an all-powerful creator God. But typically, this goes back and forth, and to be all fair, I'm going to do it kind of my way, and I'll try to stick to it. Theism is typically when we might say a personal all-powerful God. Deism is impersonal. Now, this is where etymology gets screwy. Deism is from the Latin deus. Guess what it means? God. So I mean the same thing. Theos means God, deus is Latin for God. But in scholarship, we make technical distinctions. Deism is when there's an all-powerful God, but is impersonal. So sometimes you'll hear the analogy that a deist is a person who believes in like a clockmaker. He set it up, wound it up, and then backed away. Impersonal means he won't talk to you, won't interact with you, not going to judge you per se. He's just this creator God. Does that make sense what we're saying? So these I will use sometimes. So a theist from the top one, or a deist is the noun form. If you're a Christian, which one are you? You're a theist, like Theo, T-H. So that's a good answer. Yeah, Christians are theists. We believe in a personal God who interacts with us. Okay. Now, what about this word agnostic? Agnosticism, or agnostic, comes from two good Greek words. My professor used to say, comes from two Greek words, as all good words do. But gnosis means knowledge of or study, and is another. It's called the alpha primitive. It negates it. So it means no knowledge. No knowledge. So agnosticism is the belief. It's in two forms. In its weak form, it means I don't know. I don't know. That's what it means. I don't know if God exists. I don't know if a God exists. That's in its weak form. In its strong form, it means no one can know. You see the distinction? So you can be agnostic and say, I'm not sure, I don't know. That's a weak agnostic. Strong means it is impossible for humans to ever discover it. We won't ever know. One is a personal psychological belief. One is a proposition, the strong one, about all humans at all times. It is impossible to do it. That's agnostic. Atheist, atheism, now that you're Greek scholars, you see the two words. Means what? No, or negates it. Theo? God. No God. So technically speaking, atheism, and listen here, and this is very important, atheism is the proposition, the truth claim that no God exists. No God exists. If I were an A or a Santa Clausist, if I believe in a Santa Clausism, It would be the proposition that Santa Claus does not exist. Now, everybody knows that, and that's exactly what the Greek means, because I know Greek, and that's what any dictionary would tell you. Today in modern culture, they have now hijacked, they've changed the definition of the term. And it's frustrating for us theists, anybody in scholarship, because you get willy-nilly with vocabulary words, and it's hard to talk to them. So the average atheist today will say, I'm an atheist. They'll say, what does that mean? And they're going to say, it means, I don't know if there's a God, I don't believe in one. They're agnostic. In which they're going to say, no, because atheism means I don't believe in one. Well, look, if I say I don't believe in one, that's a statement of my personal psychological state. I don't believe in something. That is not atheism, which is not the belief, I don't believe in it. It's the belief that no one exists, period. And that is a constant, if you read the blogs, you read the books, atheists will go crazy. No, atheism, no, I don't have to prove anything, no God exists. I'm just saying I don't believe in him. And then to which most theists respond, then help me understand, what would you call the person who is uncertain? What's the word you use for that? Well, that's atheism. Okay, what's the word for the person who doesn't believe in it no matter what? Well, that's different. In other words, the point is it's just a murky mess. So in this group, and forever as long as you know me, if you ever read my literature, if you listen to me in my studies, I won't be like that. I'm going to be technical. An atheist is a person who holds to the proposition, no God exists. Like a theist holds to the proposition, a personal God exists. Not, I believe there's one, but one exists, period. There's a big difference. So I will use these terms in this way. Now, let me pause and slow down. What questions or comments at all? Anything at all that hits you?
I was just going to say the first one's the only one that sounds hopeful.
I love that. Yeah. With a smile. The first one's the only one that sounds hopeful. Uh-huh. That's right. Another term I'll use often, while I'm just jumping in there, is the word skeptic. And of course, a skeptic is just a person who questions it all the time, who just questions and questions. I was a skeptic for a long time. I am still skeptical, but I'm not a skeptic. That is, I've made up my mind. I've decided. If Gene comes up and says, I saw a UFO, well, I'm going to be skeptical. Not because I don't trust you, oh, lovely Gene, it's all your earrings. I'm going to say, because I love them, I'm going to say, I'm just skeptical. I want evidence. I always want some evidence, most of the time. So I'm going to go, really? And by default, I will think of other explanations than there really was an alien you saw. Maybe it was a weather balloon. Maybe it was a unclassified jet of the military. I'm skeptical. But I'm not a skeptic in that I will never, ever make up my mind, and I can't be convinced that you're right. You might produce enough evidence, and I go, she's right. That's a technical alien ship. She got it. But when religious circles, some people are skeptics, and they just by default will never, ever make up their minds. And those people I referenced one time in a sermon, just in passing, and I have found this to be true, that there's that group of people who love to be the skeptics. They're open. They're smarter than everybody else because they don't hold to a belief. Or these two, theism, deism, or atheism, they're like, I'm open to being convinced. And they'll do that for years and years and years and years and years and years because they're above. They're too intelligent to be limited to one or the other. I mean, I've heard them, I'm above that, or I don't, Okay, well, that doesn't mean if you're a skeptic, it necessarily means you're arrogant. I'm saying I've heard people who are pompous who say it like that, and, well, I'm above all that. Some people are skeptics for a time period. Great. I was too. Great. So be a skeptic. Like my alien analogy. Great. Be a skeptic. Ask the questions. That's good. That's good. What are the questions or comments about this? If you look up the technical good dictionaries, they're a little more clear-cut, but man, it's shifting. I have a suspicion eventually the dictionaries will start redefining it because the usage will change so much. They're going to have to make a new word. I don't know what we're going to call them. Oh, one thing I didn't mention, which I'll put it on there just for fun, because I use this in a sermon, you'll hear it sometimes, is the antitheist. Antitheist. Not atheist, but anti. And of course, that just, anti means instead, in Greek it means instead of or against. And in this sense, it means against. I'm against the belief in a God. I'm against it. They are not ignorant of it. I'm not sure. That's ignorant. I'm not sure. They're not saying I don't believe it. They're against those who believe in it. I'm against the whole proposition. I'm anti. And modern atheists today who write books, many of them call themselves antitheist. People like a Peter Atkins. He teaches chemistry. He taught, some of the classic textbooks on chemistry, he wrote them. He teaches at Oxford. He's a textbook, sorry the pun, anti-theist. He thinks theists are the stupidest, backwoods. He is so condescending, which to me is always kind of funny because he's British. I can't do a British accent. He sounds so clever. That's just the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my life. And he sounds like he's going to be so sweet, and he just is as rude. And when people ask him, what about those really smart scientists like Francis Collins, who helped head up the Human Genome Project? Is he stupid? No. He's going senile. It's excellence of senility. Or he's incompetent in this area. He doesn't care. That's antitheism. Richard Dawkins is an antitheist. If you know Richard Dawkins, look him up. They're anti-theists. People like Christopher Hitchens, who died of cancer, anti-theists. They're against them, profoundly against them.
You said Richard what?
Richard Dawkins. Richard Dawkins. Stephen Hawking, I'm not sure if I would call him, he's an atheist. I don't know if he's an anti-theist, but he is an atheist. Stephen Hawking, the guy in the wheelchair, he's certainly an atheist. Yeah.
How do you spell Dawkins?
Dawkins? Dawkins? Richard Dawkins. He wrote The God Delusion. And then another guy who's real famous on TV these days, his name is Neil deGrasse Tyson. Neil, I think it's spelled like that. And then Neil deGrasse Tyson. He's a black guy, real smart. He shows up on TV all the time. He's a good teacher. He's a real good explainer. He's an atheist.
What was the movie he was featured in, the animated?
Oh, the animated movie? Yeah, what? Yeah, I don't know what it was. Yeah, he had a little small role. He's real popular these days. He always has a tie on with something about space. There was a guy who was the voice and the founder of the show called The Cosmos. You remember him? And he starts out and he says, the universe is all there ever was, all there ever is, all there ever will be.
Oh my goodness.
That's the mantra of a naturalist, which we'll go in a second. That's what's his name? It'll hit me in a second. Everyone listening to the podcast going, it's so-and-so. But I can't think right now because I'm just on the fly. So these are common. Well, we'll talk about, that's a good question about science because I hope we can dialogue about that. Let me say a few things before we get started into my reasons, and in a little bit we'll get to your actual handout. I asked this question before, and I want to keep bugging you with this because this is one of the key questions I'm convinced of a Christian's life. Why are you a Christian? Genuinely, why are you a Christian? When people ask the question, what would you say? And I hope it's not, I don't know, I'm American, I'm white, I'm whatever. I hope that's not the answer because the New Testament Christians did better than that. And when Peter says in 1 Peter 3:15, be ready to give defense of the hope that's in you. And I want to encourage you that as through all life, and that might change over time, you might give a better answer. But when I was in Florida speaking just recently on this, a guy came up and he said, how long, we were at lunch, he said, so how long did it take you to get to the place where you could do what you did today? Before he was talking about articulating his faith, I gave him some tips, then he asked that question. I said, 20 years? And he goes, his eyes got big. Oh, I said 20 years and 3 degrees. I said, and I've still got stuff to learn, believe me, but you don't have to be there now. And that's where I'm trying to go. I said, no matter what it is, what would you do? And he said, I've never thought about it. I want to get good at it. And I said, well, like I tell my people all the time is, you got to practice. You really do have to practice. You sit there, you're driving on the car and go, what would I say? I guess I would say that. No, that doesn't strike as true. What about this? My mama always said, well, is that what I believe? You got to practice. And my tips are always, and we can talk about this later, especially if you want, on how to talk to non-believers. But I like to get to a place where I can get down to 30 seconds and then like a 60-second explanation, and then we go from there. Does that mean we kind of go, what can I say in a nutshell? That when you say it, you know it's true, coming out of your mouth. And I want to encourage that. There's a big need for us to be ready. 3 independent studies show that 7 out of 10 youth leave the church. If they're in church, 7 out of 10 will leave the church and they won't come after that. They're gone. They're gone. Think about how sad that is. Of those studies, around 3 to 4 come back, usually once they get married and have kids. Well, if they even get married these days, because they want to teach morals. So we've got 3 to 4 or 5 or so in a youth group that will never step foot in the door. That's right now. Millennials, more than any other time, millennials, that generation born like the late 80s and down, more than ever are out of church. Study after study demonstrates this. There's the religious category of none when they do surveys on the census. It's 25% of the U.S. population. It's one of the fastest growing proportions of the population. And there's an enormous amount of literature out there, Richard Dawkins, Tyson, all these people. And I could list several other atheists too, Richard Stinger. I mean, there's several people. Victor Stinger, not Victor Stinger. Anyway, YouTube videos, I mean, there are millions, podcasts, get millions of downloads, and it's atheistic propaganda all day long. This isn't your mama's world anymore. Mom and daddy, it's not. Things have changed. And so Christians can't put our head in the sand. Having said that, in your world, I mean, Susan, you might not be around skeptics and atheists all day long. Some people aren't that way, right? Linda, you might be around Christians all the time. We're not exposed. That's okay. You don't have to feel guilty because you're not around an atheist every day. So the need is there in the country, in our culture. You might be exposed, might not be around that world all the time, and that's okay. But I encourage you to be ready to give a defense and try your best to befriend people who aren't Christians wherever you can, and be ready to say something about it. That's all I'm saying. So I'm trying to encourage you. There is a need, but it may not be in your exact world. Some of you, it is in your world. Yeah, go ahead.
I just had a quick, somebody said that.
So if I explain to a person and their whole response is, that's stupid,
Yeah.
if I don't know them well, I would do something different than if I knew them well.
What if you've known him for since you've been in Kansas?
Since what?
Since you've been in Kansas. 3
Since-
years. I've known him for 3 years.
Oh, 3 years. Oh, 3 years, I know them pretty well. I would say, that's hateful. I mean, I would be more like a friend and say, why'd you say that's stupid? Or I make a joke and say, your mom is stupid. I mean, I made some joke. But if I didn't know him well, if it were a serious conversation to know him well, I would say, why do you think that's stupid?
She's one of those people that thinks.
So people have died and she blames God for it. Yeah, Greg Kokel out of California, he does a study that I would like to do here sometime. It's just a quick 6-week course. It's great. And he's right to say whenever we have these dialogues, this is so important. It's so important. Back to your question, when someone makes a claim, in philosophy we call it a truth proposition. When someone makes a claim, whoever makes the claim bears the burden of proof. That's absolutely true. So when a person says that's stupid, they've made a claim. My question is, what evidence do you have for that? Why is it stupid? What everybody gets wrong, if they haven't thought about this before, is the first thing Christians do is go on the defensive and go, it's not stupid. Here's why it's stupid, because my grandma's a Christian and I can tell you what God did and I love Jesus, and they go right on defensive. And I'm saying, and Greg Kokel and many others say, that's a false move, or an unnecessary move. I think he's right. I have no reason to defend that. That's stupid. All they've said is their view. That's like saying, I don't like broccoli. Why do you like broccoli? People love broccoli. Broccoli is good for you. My grandmother ate broccoli all the time. No one would do that. We'd go, I like it. But Christianity, people get real defensive. They can get real defensive. So whenever someone has a claim, we're listening very carefully to claims. And when they say, that's stupid, that's false, that doesn't make any sense, that's weird, those are all claims. So my response is, why? Why is that stupid? Why is that weird? Why is that false? That's dumb. Why is that dumb? I don't like that. Why don't you like it? So you can ask and ask and ask to ask their evidence for it. And I'm telling you, in my experience, every person I've talked to, every skeptic I've talked to, besides those who live in this atheistic argument debate world all the time, not everyone does. The majority don't. The majority of people in life are 2 questions remaining into a dead end. They are 2 questions into a dead end. And that goes for Christians too. Why do you think so-and-so? Well, I just think so-and-so. Why do you think that? I don't know, I just do. Boom, 2 questions, dead end. And that goes for atheists, it goes for Christians. Well, I just believe it's true. Well, because I know there's evidence. What evidence do you have? Well, I just do. It's just, but most Christians are terrified to bring up their faith, because what if they ask me questions I don't know? And most people don't ask questions. They don't know anything, and what they know about Christianity is false. My Bible's been translated 400 times. It's been right. No, it's not. Who told you that? I've always heard that. They were wrong. What else you got? Oh, well, no, that's it. I mean, they're just dead end.
Yeah.
And that works on the average person.
It was frustrating because I gave her.
Yeah, but that's a great point. And on that little, if I can speak on that right there, when those things happen, which is okay, we don't have to be all-knowing, right? Especially if you're not a specialist who's gone to school for a long time. When you don't know what to say, all you do is do some research and then come back. Especially if you're going to see him again, you say, I don't know the answer to that question. Let me do some research. I want to get back to you. Well, David, what if I met him on a train or a bus? You get their email address. Hey, do you mind if I contact? That's a great question. Can I do some research? and get back to you. You're showing that you're humble, you're open-minded. You'll do some research for them. You'll be their Google. Yeah, right, that's okay. Yes, ma'am.
I was just gonna say,
What happens is, my question always is, why do you think that? And you get back, and you're not being mean, and why do you think, but it's not stupid to me at all, so why do you think that? What makes it stupid? You just, and I find as you're genuinely interested in the reasons, but I'm telling you, the odds are extremely high she doesn't have reasons. I don't know, it's just stupid.
Well, she's just mad because her dad passed away of, I think it's about ALS or something.
And that's very common. People, they see pain and suffering in the world and say, there's no way God, and I get it, but it's a very,
I guess I just hold a lot when they say that because
so if you really know that person well, that may be a good conversation to have to say, I'm so sorry, the pain and whatever. I've been through that kind of hell before or whatever. Maybe you can't relate, maybe you can. To say, I'm telling you, the risen Jesus can change your life. There's no reason to have hope and comfort and love in this world. He's the only truth there is. And I would love to tell you about him because he's the only way that you're going to ever get over this. He's the only way. And I'm sorry you're upset. I'm sorry you lost your dad, but God is not to blame for that. He's not. He's not to blame for it. You're mad at the wrong person because he's not to blame for it. Well, I thought God was in control. He is in control. He's not in that kind of control. It's a different kind. It's a meted out control, and that's true. That's like saying the CEO's control everything that happens in every single position of every single organization. That's nonsense. That's nonsense. At every single level, each person along the level has the freedom to make choices, but the CEO is in control of the direction overall of the organization. But the CEO does not make every person do a thing. So God is ultimately in control of history, but it does not make us do things. And so, yeah, grief is the number one reason I found people, and I've said that several times in sermons, I'm going to keep saying it. It's the number one reason why people doubt and don't want to come. They have repressed grief. Okay, a couple things. One is, it's not going to appeal to everybody's need, like I already said. Two, I can't make you believe something. Good news, right? I can't make you. I'm also trying to encourage you here. When you talk to a non-believer, you can't make them believe it. So I'm encouraging you to let go of that pressure. Let your chest ease up. What if in the moment I got to lead them to the cross right now? You can't make them believe it. You cannot make them believe it. The word prove means to demonstrate. I'm going to spell this real fast. Demonstrate the veracity or the truthfulness of something by evidence or argument. To demonstrate the truth of something by evidence or argument. That something's real and true. That's what prove means, to demonstrate it. Well, I can attempt to prove that Christianity is true. I still can't make you believe it. Think about it in a court of law. The defense attorney and the prosecuting attorney, that says demonstrate the truth of evidence. I'll scribble fast. I'm in a courtroom and I'm trying to give the evidence. I can't make the jury believe something. I can produce as much evidence as I can and attempt to demonstrate, that is, attempt to prove, but that's not how we're going to talk. The lawyer's going to say, I'm going to prove to you that he murdered her. I'm going to prove to you. That means I'm going to demonstrate it. But psychologically speaking, that's hyperbolic. You can't make a person believe that something is true. You can't. You can torture them. They can say things to stop hurting, but they're not going to turn and believe it. Right now, look, there's a pink elephant right there in the room. Now, how many of you believe it? Raise your hand. I can go, don't you trust me? I've got a PhD. I'm from Mississippi. We always tell the truth. And you go, good for him. Pat me on the head. There's no pink elephant. So what would it take? I'm going to prove it to you. I'm going to bring chemistry and DNA. I'll do what I can. Well, David, I don't care what you say. I don't believe in pink elephants. Well, there are a lot of atheists in the world and skeptics, and that's fine. They're going to say, I don't care what you say. You can't make me believe it. So I don't feel the pressure of that. On my Twitter is a social media thing. If you're not familiar with that, it's kind of like a Facebook, but different. And on my Twitter, I get all kinds of comments. Very, very, very hateful, cussing comments from atheists often. And one time I had a couple little bit dialogue. I don't hardly ever take debate. And even when I do, I go, oh, I shouldn't have taken it. Because you only got a few characters to type something. But one guy, he came back with a response. It seemed nice at first, and he came back and they tag team. So they'll tag all these other people, and then 3 or 4 people will write responses, and they'll layer like 20 responses. And they're the most hateful, condescending jokes at your expense. And at one time I told a guy, I said, I don't believe something. I said, that's fine. And I said, I feel no compulsion whatsoever to convince you otherwise. I wish you best in life. That's just a cop-out. He was all ticked off. I didn't respond again. But I really meant it. I thought, I don't feel any compulsion. There's no way this guy's open-minded. There's no way. David, I really want to know. Well, that helps me realize I can't make people believe something. And I don't like debating. I don't like arguing. I don't like all that stuff. I do like discussing. So if they want to discuss, I want to do that. But, okay, the third thing I want to say is, so the first is, this isn't for everybody, depending on your world, your sphere of influence. 2, I can make you believe something. 3, you can believe something without being certain. You can believe something without being certain. Now, I said this in a sermon not long ago, and some of you looked at me crazy. But let me say this again, and that's okay. We tend to use the word think when we're like 51 to 75% sure. Think about that. I think there's going to be cold tonight. I think it's going to rain. That means we're not really sure at all. I think the meeting's tomorrow. We say the word I know when we're way up there. That goes about 99%. And then, now, I realize in common language we say the word sure, I'm certain. Will Bob be there at dinner? Yes, I'm sure. Why we say sure? Because you sent me an email. But are you really sure? Are you 100% if you thought about it? Could Bob have lied? Could he be mistaken? Could he pegged the wrong night? Could someone have hacked into Bob's email and sent you something else? Could you have misread it? There's a lot of logical possibilities. If someone said, is that true, Linda? And I just did the same thing, and then Linda might go, she's honest, she might go, well, when you say it like that, well, I guess I'm not 100% sure, but I sure know it. I mean, I sure think so. I think Bob is trustworthy. I don't think someone has. There's certain things you're assuming he can be trusted. It's not been hacked. His account has it. But philosophically speaking, I might push you on that. And you say, oh, I guess I'm not 100% certain, because that's saying about my existence. I could be right now in a dream and I'm not real. I think that's silly. So I'm 99.999% sure that I exist. I'm 99.9, and my wife goes, that's just silly. I'm certain. Because I know it's silly to you. I know. But all I'm saying is, if we're looking for that kind of 100% certainty in Christianity, my response is, and you can be different, my response is, you don't have to have that. You don't have to have that. You can be, well, I don't know, that's a crazy percentage. You can be 75% sure. That's enough to believe in something. Think about that. If I were 75% sure that the taxi cab driver was legit, I'd get in the car. Is it 75% sure if a doctor was going to do a good job? I'd say, yeah, I'll do it. 75%, that's good odds. I want it higher if I can get it. Well, the same thing with my eternal fate. I mean, I hope it gets more than 75, but some people stick around there for a while and maybe get it up. My own view, if I had to put a number, I'm like 95 plus on my faith, 95% sure, above easily. Easily. I'm what I would call virtually certain. So I'm trying to encourage you here because sometimes in your own faith life, and sometimes when we talk to other people, you might meet skeptics or atheists to go, yeah, you say you know that, but how are you sure? That's a very common retort. It's very common. I'm trying to encourage you here and said your response could be, unless it's, no, I am sure and here's why. It could also be, well, I'm not, but I know it. And I'm okay with that. I have knowledge of it. Like I know I'm married. I know I have red hair. I know if it's you. I know I'm a grandmother. I know it. But yes, I could be delusional. I sure don't think I am. But unless you say no and you're like my wife who goes, I know I'm sure. Well, then be sure. But you just don't have to be. There's no reason to think you have to have, I think you have to worship at the feet of certain. You don't have to be. The last thing I'll say before we get this kind of intro stuff, but I think these are very important. The first was your realm of influence, you might say. The fourth thing is this, and that is nothing I say here in this whole experience will be the knockdown, drag-out argument. And what I mean is, if you find an educated atheist or skeptic, they're going to have something to say in response to what I say, including tonight. In just a second, we'll start some other stuff. They're going to have something to say.
Because they've practiced.
They've practiced. Yes, ma'am. They have practiced, and they've read people like me, and they had other little atheist clubs. There's a massive one at KU. There are atheist clubs all over the country and the world, and they sit around just like this, and so do Christians dealing with how do I defend the faith, how do I defend non-faith, and they go at it. They love to argue. They've got all kinds, thousands of books. They have their own journals, their own magazines. Skeptic magazine is one of the most popular magazines. They have atheist heroes who make tons of money being paid to speak, like Richard Dawkins. They'll come out to the biggest events. They've got the Humanist Society is a massive international meeting group. I mean, there's a lot of literature out there. So if the goal is when we're talking about Christianity to find that one thing that the informed atheist would go, I don't know what to say, give up. Because they're going to have some, well, you could say, did you know scientists have said, and I want to encourage you, because if you go, like, oh my Lord, I thought they would go, never mind, I'm wrong, you're right, let's get baptized. If they have something to retort, if they practiced, they're going to say something in response. That doesn't mean you've done a bad job. It just means they have something to say. So then the question is, well, then what do I do now? I like to think of the analogy all the time of a courtroom. We're just going, what would the jury say? The problem is, you're the jury. You're the jury. So Deborah, when that skeptic is saying, well, I think you could say science is blah, blah, blah. You're in that moment when they're making a claim, they got to back up that burden of proof, just like you do when you talk about Jesus. But when they talk about it, you're listening for the reasons. You know, why is that? You're asking more reasons. Tell me more about that. And as you're listening, you're the jury and the judge. Do I find that convincing? Do I find that compelling? So instead of being scared that they have something to say, you're just processing, does that make sense to me? Do I find that compelling? Does that make sense? So I'm trying to encourage you, if you ever do talk with a person, they go, well, that's all been settled. I'll give you a little quick example. I was on the airplane flying down, had a layover and all that. But on one of my airplane trips down to Florida, I was sitting by a guy, and it seemed like nice. We were joking back and forth a couple times. He had tattoos all over him, big old goatee, and seemed like a nice guy and a little rough around the edges. And we were laughing about stuff, and I was reading this Kindle book. I was reading the book. It's listed in your handout. It's under the deal about the soul. It's Evidence of the Afterlife, but it's a sequel, God and the Afterlife. And the stories about people who have died and come back were so fascinating. And I was going, I mean, it's just, and my spirit, I prayed a lot on the trips, like, I want to talk about my faith if I can, because I'm sitting there, I got a captive audience. But I don't want to be that guy who won't shut up about whatever. But I'm thinking, I've got a chance. And I felt just real stirred up to say something. And I thought, well, let me wait, because I kept thinking, no, say something. I thought, what do I say? I'm processing, what's the best way to go at it? And I thought in my mind, just get him to read that story. Just get him to read it. And I thought, I don't know, he was doing something at the time. And this one story is so amazing. But then I paused and I said, you ought to read this book. He goes, what book is that? And it's a book called God and the Afterlife. And I said, a radiation oncologist interviewed over 4,000 people. He tells the stories of those who have died and come back. It is amazing. And he goes, yeah, they've discovered the reason why they do all that now. They discover right before you die. You hear that quickly? They've just, the magical they is always whatever goes. They've already decided, they figured out what happens is right before you die, you really don't die, your brain draws up certain memories right before you die. Yeah, that's crazy stuff. Now, that's period. In that moment, I'm a jury. And I'm listening to what his response. So I'm thinking nonsense. So how do I say it in a kind way? Because that's ludicrous. There's no way. So I said, well, I don't know, man, because there are stories, many stories where someone dies and comes back with new knowledge.
Yeah, it's like, how can you have
How do you have knowledge of what happens when you're dead? And other things like the blind, he goes, yeah, that's crazy stuff, man. And also those stories about people who have said they had former lives and all that stuff, that's crazy stuff. Yeah, I go, yeah. And I paused. I was letting it be a seed. If I guess a little simmer for a little bit, and I paused. I went on for a little bit, and later on, by himself, he leaned over and said, yeah, that stuff's crazy, man. Like going down a rabbit hole, man. You never know. It just goes down and down and down. I said, yeah, it's really interesting stuff. It's really good. And I kept praying to him. I mentioned more, and we didn't talk much more after that, but he didn't seem to want to, that he was done. But I hope, I was going to point to her, I hope I planted some seeds to say, maybe I hadn't thought this too much about that. All I'm saying is in the moment, I didn't feel pressure. It's not for everybody. I didn't feel pressure to demonstrate. No. Listen here. Right? Don't be argumentative. But I did want to get them thinking. Greg Kokel, the one in California, I love how he says it. He says, my goal is to put a pebble in their shoe. Doesn't that annoy the snot out of you? Don't you got to stop what you're doing to get that pebble out? He said, that's what I want to do. My goal every time is to put a pebble in their shoe. And I've always this, and of course everybody always copies that from him now. And that's what I was thinking in the airplane, I'm thinking, how can I disturb him? What can I do to just get him that pebble in the shoe that when he leaves here? And God can use that, very much so. And since I'm on that, I feel a little inspired. Let me say this real quickly. I want to encourage you. Not everybody has a spiritual gift of evangelism. And that's okay. Christians need to be prepared to say something, but we don't always lead them to the cross. And here's the way I see it, based on what I think is an accurate reading of the New Testament. I think of coming to faith like letters A to Z, all right? Da-da-da-da-da, L, da-da-da-da, all the way down to YZ. So Y is that final confession, and Z is coming to the cross. That's it. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is growing in the faith. Okay, so we have no idea where that skeptic, atheist, or person is on this float on the ladder. We just don't know. And I'm convinced that in the Christian view, we do not have to move them from B or C to Z in one conversation. The Spirit might lead you there. You might feel compelled to go share the gospel, then you better share it. But if that's the case and it sticks, I would argue they weren't at B, C. They were really over here. The Spirit had all been working on them. But what I find encouraging is you can move someone from B to D, and you've done something phenomenal. That pebble might push them, man, dadgummit, I can't stop thinking about that story he said on the airplane. And then next time someone comes. That's why Paul said sometimes we reap where we did not sow. That is, we come, he says to the Corinthians, sometimes we come up and we are able to get the fruit from something we never sowed in the first place. Paul will go to churches he didn't start, but he was able to reap and gather some harvest and help them grow and get some converts. And he's fully cognizant, this isn't my doing, I'm just come late in the game. And I have met people in my life, all my life in different seasons. I have helped get from, by the Spirit's leading, whatever letter. There are people I've come in my life, I get them all of a sudden they're like an R. Like, boy, these people are primed and pumped. The Apostle Paul said it this way, they're not far from the kingdom. Jesus did too, Jesus said, you're not far from the kingdom. I think those people, letters up, TRZY, YZ, they're almost there. There are some people at this church who aren't far from the kingdom. Now, sometimes it might take them a long time to get from R to S. Cool, but I want to be there with them if I can. Right? Some people's questions are much more profound, what they got to figure out first, besides the A, which is, that's whatever it is. So I'm trying to encourage you there. So on the airplane, I wanted to get Pebble in his shoe. I wanted to bother him. I wanted to think more about it because he might go back to Google and do some more research and go, I never thought about the knowledge part. But what if someone else, David, down the road, what if it's 15 years from now, some random Christian, just like any of us here, are sitting on a train with him and go, what you reading there? That's the Bible. And what if that all started from one short conversation that I had the courage on an airplane? And see, I don't feel guilty on leading to the cross. I felt happy that I did what I thought, and I felt very peaceful about it. So I pray, and I prayed for him on the airplane. God, please, whoever comes next, keep the reaping coming. Whoever comes next after me. And a little footnote, that's how I see my ministry. Every ministry I've been to has been a season. The odds are probably high I won't retire here. This will probably be a season of my life. And I'm trying to do as much daggum sowing and reaping as I can while I'm here. And when I'm gone, it's going to be someone else that's doing to keep the torch. That's the game with all of you too, when you make disciples, whoever that is. But okay, no more sermons there, but I told you I was going to go in and out of different things. Okay, naturalism and scientism. Anything else we can talk about before I move on? Okay, naturalism. Naturalism is a philosophical view. Philosophical. It's a philosophical view that all that exists is composed or made of, is composed of matter or energy. Matter or energy. Now, if you know your physics, matter and energy are interchangeable. So I'll just keep saying matter or energy, matter equals MC squared. We can flip it back and forth. Thank you, Einstein. So everything which exists, that means, Chelsea, even your own thoughts are composed of matter or energy. It's gray matter in this view, or it's energy in the synapses just popping off. That's all it is. That's all it is. So when you die, by the way, there is no you. When I say the word naturalism, there's no you as a soul, because you don't have a soul, because souls would be made of matter and energy, and that'd be silly. They would say, no, you don't have a soul, because I'm a naturalist. So when you die, what happens? Nothing. Your body decomposes, you're done. And you say, well, isn't that scary? I've said this to atheists. Isn't that scary? They said, I wasn't scared before I got here. I didn't exist before I was born, and I won't exist afterward. What difference does it make? That's what they're going to say. So a naturalism is the philosophical view that all that exists is matter and energy. That's it. So let me use an analogy. I'm going to use a little bit. Imagine you and I were fishing a fishbowl, and we've only been in one fishbowl all of our lives. And we come up against a naturalist fish. And I go, hey, you think there's something outside this fishbowl? The naturalist fish is going to say, of course not. I'm going to say, well, why do you think that? Because we all know what exists is just the fishbowl. Well, how do you know that's all that exists? Well, we just do. I mean, why would you think there's something else? I don't know. There are things that happen in this fishbowl sometimes that really make me wonder if that's all that exists. Really, like what? Well, like fish are really nice to each other. We follow this moral law. No, moral law is just a fabric of your brain and chemicals in your brain. That doesn't make sense to me because they're not chemicals. They're objective and they're different. The idea that I ought to be good isn't a chemical reaction. Yeah, it is. Your brain has chemical reactions. I know my brain has chemical reactions. That doesn't. Well, let's move on to something else. We'll talk about morality in a little bit, and we will. But, every once in a while there are things that happen in the fishbowl that I just don't understand. You know that, what's that stuff called that comes to the top of the water sometime? It's food, morons, food. All you other fishbowlists are the same. Okay, thanks so much for your kindness. Yeah, let's call it food. Where do you think that food comes from? It comes from somewhere in the bowl. Of course it does. Well, why do you think that? Because it's made of matter or energy in the fishbowl. We all know that. Do you think it comes from somewhere outside the fishbowl? We've already covered this, dummy. There's nothing outside the fishbowl. Can you demonstrate there's nothing outside the fishbowl? No, I don't need to. We all know that's all that exists. Well, if you can't demonstrate it and you can't prove it, then why do you believe it? Because we all know that's all that exists. It's a philosophical assumption that all that exists is matter and energy. They can't prove it because they just assume it's a philosophical assumption. And there's another thing that goes along with it, and that is scientism. And I'm going to go back to my fishbowl analogy in a second. Scientism. Scientism used to be called logical. Now, you don't have to remember all this. I'm just throwing out a lot of tidbits for fun's sake, okay? This will give you an extra crowds in heaven or something. Logical positivism. It was really popular in the 1920s and 30s. And very, very popular. And it's the belief that science demonstrates all truth and all reality. The scientific method. Today we call it, colloquially speaking, scientism. What they used to call logical. Logical positivism was real popular and then it completely abandoned. The guy, in fact, who was the number one proponent, ended his career and said the only problem was it was absolute abject failure. Yeah. Completely abandoned by philosophical system. But scientism and logical positivism absolutely is alive and well. It is alive and well in Western culture. And I can give you example after example as I move on here. One more time, scientism is a belief that the scientific method answers everything. It helps us understand all reality, every bit of it. So let me put a fine edge on that and reverse it. This means that if science cannot prove it, it does not exist. If science cannot prove it, it's a stupid question to ask in the first place. Logical positivists used to say the question, does God exist, is senseless because God, by definition, the all-powerful God, would not be composed of matter and energy. And so does God exist is like asking blah, 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 blah. It makes no sense. It is literally an irrational question to ask because it must be answered by the scientific method. Today it is alive and well. If you want to ask any person to come on your TV show, about the way the world works, you do not bring on a philosopher, you don't bring on a theologian or ethicist, you bring on a scientist. You bring on Neil deGrasse Tyson, Michio Kaku, who's a Japanese-American scientist. You bring Richard Dawkins. You ask what's his name in the wheelchair? Stephen Hawking. They ask Stephen Hawking to bring him on TV and say, Stephen Hawking, is there a God? I so badly want to be asked that with my specialty, and someone go, David, how do you take out a heart? In other words, it's ridiculous. It's not my field. But because ask a scientist, why? Because he knows everything. He is the gateway to all truth about reality. And if he says there's no God, we go, it's settled. It's settled done. Because the scientists in our world today hold all the authority. I remember a professor who said one time, she said, a while back, I mean, it's funny but sad, back when there was a lot of controversy in the Southern Baptist Convention, she was at this event, and a guy goes up there and he holds the Bible, and he holds the Bible in his hand by the microphone, and he says, I'm a so-and-so surgeon, and this Bible's an inerrant word of God. And she said, she's so sweet and good sense of humor. She says, I so wanted to run up on stage and grab the Bible and say, and I'm a theologian, and I want to take his heart out. In other words, it'd be silly to say that. Who cares? But no one in the crowd probably thought that besides her. They probably went, oh, he's a medical doctor. He's a scientist. And since he's a scientist, it must be true. And that's scientism. It's the shadows of that. It's the leftover from this almost 100 years ago. It really, really is. Theology used to be called the queen of the sciences. For 150 years, it was called the queen of the sciences. Go to Oxford today, and they have sketched in the walls those kinds of things. It was the number one study. It was considered the most authoritative, most respected field for a long time. Now, in general, for most people, it's a joke. They couldn't stand it. They can't stand philosophers either. Stephen Hawking began his most recent book. He was co-written, and it says, his first sentence says, philosophy is dead. Now, he just right then wrote out thousands of years of philosophical speculation, all the way back to Plato and Aristotle, all dead. All of his scholar friends, all of them at Cambridge, Oxford, they're all stupid people. Why? Because it's dead. Stephen Hawking, because science answers everything. We don't need philosophy at all. So he says that, then he goes on to write a whole book about the philosophy of science, which everyone has critiqued him on. I mean, it's nonsense. But because they're scientists, they're assuming no one's going to question it. Richard Dawkins, who wrote The God Delusion, whoever's asked the question, they wrote The God Delusion, he's a biologist. He seems to be a good biologist. But he writes and writes and writes and writes and writes and writes about God's existence. And it demonstrates he's a biologist because his literature about God is horrible. It's not informed. It's not good. I'm not saying because he's an atheist. It's not good. Even atheists don't like it. Several atheist scholars I've read are embarrassed by it because it's not sophisticated at all. There are atheist philosophers who write good books against Christianity, but these botanists and biologists and whatever, Victor Stenger is he's a physicist out of Hawaii, University of Hawaii. His book is full of those kind of things. It's just it's not a good response. But no one really cares. Why? Because they're scientists, and scientists tell us all about reality. Okay, back to my fishbowl. I'm talking my naturalist fish, and I go, well, how do you know that? Where did that food come from? Well, and I go, I don't know yet. What do you mean you don't know yet? Well, we don't know yet, but scientists are working on that. We're not sure where the food comes, but we're going to figure it out. Why do you think that? Because scientists do that. They give us truth and reality. That's why we trust them. Let me guess. What do you think? This person brings the food? Well, I think it's a possibility. This is exactly what they've said. Peter Atkins says this all the time. That, and Richard Dawkins says too, that's lazy. That's lazy, stupid thinking. It's lazy. It's lazy. It's God of the gaps. God of the gaps. You've given up on science. You've given up on progress. Period or pause. In their worldview, that's true. Because if all that's composed of matter and energy, and give science a chance, and you say, I think maybe God did it, you've stopped the process of their game. You've stopped it. In their worldview, science has got to come to the end, period. When you go, maybe Chelsea did it. Oh, Chelsea did it. Chelsea did it. Chelsea did it. You're lazy. It's lazy. Give it a chance, and science will discover a natural cause. See, we say it all the time, right? We say, how do they die? They died of natural causes. That means a human didn't do it. A naturalist believes that everything is a natural cause. Your thoughts are natural causes. They're not, listen, they believe this very much so. The thoughts you're having right now and I'm having, and the words coming out of my mouth, I'm not choosing them. There's no I. I don't have a choice to do it. All evolution for billions of years has got me to this place of the brain chemistry the way it has it, based on DNA I did not choose, and it is causing me to think these things and to say these things. Back in the 40s or 50s, there was two young men who saw this. Well, there's a little background. They really, really wanted to see what it felt like to murder someone. So they go out and grab this kid and murder him, kill him. They go to court, and the lawyer's defense. Now, picture this back in the 40s and 50s, right after evolution, it really hit hard after the Scopes trial. His defense says it wasn't their fault. Evolutionary drive that started millions of years ago in the human race drove them to this point, and it's not their fault. They had no control of what they did. He won. It was the very first case in United States history. It was called diminished responsibility plea. It's the very first case. because evolution made them do it. They're naturalist. Yes, ma'am.
Why don't they think that everybody thinks alike then? Just because everybody's brain chemistry and all that stuff is different?
Yes, ma'am, that's it. Why would they think everybody thinks alike? Because what you just said, the brain chemistry is different, evolution puts it out in a different way. Christopher Hitchens, who died of cancer, who was such a funny guy, British guy, but boy, anyway. He used to say all the time that belief in God is the last leftover stages of our early primate development on the fields. That is, it served us an evolutionary survival, and it's fobbed off on us. It's the leftovers. And he would always say, and hopefully, really, really soon, we'll be able to shake off this leftover unnecessary survival mechanism. So that's what he would say. We all have different evolutionary needs and drives. Some people bless their heart. He's not Southern, he's British, but I'm translating him. He might say bless their heart. It's not their fault. You grew up in America, which already you're a Christian. Of course you are too. It's not your social environment, and there's evolutionary needs. But the people who are enlightened have gotten over that. And there's a guy who's a philosopher. He looks like Santa Claus. He just does. He got big old white beard, big old hair. And his students get big old beards and big hair. Anyway, he started a group called the Brights. The atheist group, the Brights. They're the bright ones. They're enlightened. Of course, we must be the dims. And people will say all the time, why would you do that? He said, no, I don't mean to slam on that. Yes, you do. So it didn't really pick up, though. But he tried real hard to make that the new name for atheism, which is the group of the Brights. Because they're enlightened. They've shaken off that evolutionary byproduct. Okay, make sense? So from their view, if you're a naturalist, which almost every atheist is, and almost everybody believes in some form of this, to say the word God did it at all is beating the natural causes argument, assumption. So again, one more time, just to make sure I'm not trying to beat that horse, if someone walked in and Jean walked in, there's a corpse on the ground, and she goes, what happened? How did the person die? If you're a naturalist, if you said anything else besides he died of natural causes, you're lazy. You're adding an explanation that is not needed. Now, they might say, in this world that's different, sure, because another body could have done it. But in naturalism, they believe, ultimately though, even if Gene says, I tricked you, I murdered him. Well, they would say, yeah, well, there's no you. Your evolutionary needs drove you to do that. In other words, I can trace your causes all the way down to your brain to an evolutionary impulse. Because there's no you. There's no you. There's your brain and there's an evolutionary impulse.
That's just totally stupid.
Ridiculous.
No wonder it's a mixed up world.
I know.
No wonder it's a mixed up world. That's right. Yeah. And you need to know, on the internet, in the books, this is the number one taught thing about atheists. Our high school students, our university students are bombarded by naturalism. Bombarded. So,
why do they fight and get their way more so than Christians?
that's a great question. In the university setting, to repeat the question, why do they get their way more than Christians? In the university setting, and this is not a novel observation, I think others are right, who I've heard this from too, but they're right. What happens is in university setting, if you're familiar with anything, KU to whatever, and KU is a good example, I'm sure, I can't prove it, but universities slowly hire people who are naturalists or atheists. And as soon as they become the chair of a department or can influence the chair, they deliberately only choose those who think like them. And because of that, and it only takes a few years for this to happen before you've gotten 50 to 60, 70% of the faculty who are atheists, then those atheist philosophers or teachers or scientists, whatever, they influence their students. And or students come to them because they are that way. And if they get published and get well known, and they come on and go, but they're a scientist. And they caricature Christianity. You either got to believe blank or blank. Either got to believe in Noah's Ark or you believe in science. That this false contrast nonsense. But they don't know any different because they're not prepared. Many of them come from churches. They're not prepared. And then they get deconverted. Then they become professors at faculty, and it repeats and repeats and repeats it. And I can give you a case in point. William Lane Craig makes this point. He's exactly right. For a long time, in philosophy departments, atheism ruled the day. You were absolutely a minority to be a theist at any kind, Jewish, Christian, Muslim. Nowadays, things have radically changed. And in the English-speaking world, that's Europe and the UK and US, things have really changed. There is an overwhelming surge of theist and Christian philosophers, really, really good ones. Guy at Notre Dame, his name is Alvin Plantinga, is world class. He's been around. He's probably close to retirement now, if he's not already retired. But he is world class. But when he started writing, he was at Notre Dame. No one really cared. It's called Warranted Belief. But now it's in its third or fourth edition. It's a classic. He's got a new book, which I have on there. It's the top of page 2. It says Knowledge and Faith, Knowledge and something. What is it called? Knowledge and...
Christian belief.
Yeah, that's his newest version of his. That's kind of a condensed, easy-to-read version of Warranted Belief. But Plantinga is the junk, as I say. He's the man. But my point is, he's an example. William Lane Craig, J.P. Moreland. I mean, there's tons of others that are really well-known Christian philosophers. But that's because, slowly but surely, they have fought their way by being very competent, writing good literature, and sticking in there. And then they get to hire and people go, I want to work with Plantinga. I want to work with him. I want to work with him. Biola University over in California has the largest philosophy master's program, I think, in the country, if not the world, and it's a Christian university. They produce more master's degree students in philosophy than any other school. And what I've heard from a few different people online is that they have a great reputation, that they know professors know other professors at other major universities, but they go off to do a PhD, and they love having Biola because they're so well performing. It's like they have advanced placement or something. That's good for us, because that will change the landscape of that could change the landscape for 100 years. It can take a long time for that to, and if it could stay up, we can have some really good Christian philosophers. Scientists are a little different. Scientists, it just depends. That kind of comes and goes. There are some really good, bright Christian scientists. But so on the university level, that's how. It is not a magical, they do it deliberately. They really want to. Yes, ma'am, sure.
So are you saying that most of the universities, that it's scientists who control it, or theists?
Oh, that's great. So in a university, I was talking about primarily in the science department or the philosophy department or English department, those departments, they can control it. Universities overall, that depends on, in my understanding, that depends on more of the sway of the school. Like state schools, deliberately, they're going to be more appealing to those non-religious. Where religious, well, at least modern religious affiliation, like Yale, Princeton, Harvard, all have religious affiliation, but not so much now. And they were founded as Christian schools, but each department will decide how much they are influenced by Christian, and they will block them. They will. Sometimes I think people, not y'all, but are in denial. Like, they would never do that. Yes, they would. Yes, they would. They cut granting. They cut research. There was a guy who taught, I'm on the fly now. I shouldn't do this probably. He's not the Smithsonian. Where was he at? It's one of the premier institutions. It's not a university. It's something else like the Smithsonian or something. And he has, I think, 2 earned PhDs or something. This guy is one of the brightest. He was the editor of a journal, which is a big deal, and he allowed one journal article by a guy who argued for intelligent design. When it got out, the powers that be went and confiscated his keys, kicked him out immediately, fired him. He can't get any journal job. Last I heard, he couldn't get jobs, wasn't allowed to write in journals anymore. Because as an editor, he just allowed an article. He didn't write it. He said this met the rigorous demands of what we do in this journal. It's no joke. And people are like, they wouldn't do. Yes, they do it. Oh my goodness. So we need good Christian thinkers, that's for sure. The only problem with naturalism is that it's false. At least it seems to me. Because for naturalism to be true, you have to demonstrate that everything in reality is composed of matter and energy. Well, I can think of several things that are not composed of matter and energy. Several, like numbers. Numbers are every scientist believes we believe in numbers, and numbers aren't composed of matter and energy. I mean, not at all. Platonists might think that, but most people aren't Platonists. That is, that it really does exist, but we are out here. Moral value judgment. So we might say morals. It is good to be honest. Well, that's a basic moral law of a human race, and we'll talk about that more later on.
What about thought?
Well, that's another one. Well,
Because your brain there's things that happen in your brain, but that's not your thoughts.
you might say, well, to be real specifically,
Mind versus
I will
brain.
call them mental states.
Yeah.
Mental states, which includes beliefs, thoughts, a whole bunch of things. They will say in response, no, those are brain states, not mental states. So you have to argue for every one of these. And I will say they're not states of the brain. The mind, and I'll talk about this later on, I don't want to get ahead of myself. So I would argue, absolutely. But numbers are one thing everybody, yeah, I kind of get the point. But it's not real, it's just, well, no, wait a second. If everything that exists, how are we appealing to that? Laws of nature are composed of matter and energy. Scientific method itself is not composed of matter and energy. Science can't prove scientism. It cannot prove it. So when someone says, we all know what science will prove, it'll prove it. My question is, why do you think that? Because we all know that's what science will do. And I say, what scientific evidence do you have that the scientific method will prove it all? That's why logical positivism was abandoned almost 100 years ago. It's self-contradictory. They believe in something that can't be proved itself. That's just like saying, I don't speak English. That's nonsense. You just spoke English. So if everything is proved by the scientific method, except for the method itself, well, then it's false. You might say, well, then certain things are proved by the science. Well, then I agree with that. Certain things are proved by the scientific method.
But not all things.
Not all things. You might as well say, what is the mathematical formula for why I like sunsets? I mean, really, you might as well say that. What's the mathematical formula for that? And keep trying. Keep trying. What's the best cookbook recipe for how to play baseball? They'll give it time. Keep looking. Keep flipping the pages. Keep looking. And I might raise my hand and go, I don't think it will answer. You're just lazy.
Say it requires batter.
It requires, oh, Lord. It requires batters. That's good. I'm going to use that one. It requires,
That was good.
it requires batter.
Sorry, they automatically.
Why do cows have hooves? Because they lactose. Sorry. I heard that one yesterday. Because they lactose.
We need more fresh air.
I need more fresh air. I do. I need more milk. What are some examples? And so my point is, of course, is I love science. Yay. I wanted to be an astronaut all my life. I love science. It's just that science has bounds. It cannot, there's no way. What about philosophy, morality, civil law? I mean, there's a whole poetry, cooking. There's an enormous amount of things that science cannot demonstrate.
How about conscience?
Well, consciousness, I'm going to go there too. That's mental state. That's related. That's right. Now, they're going to disagree with that. Naturalists don't believe in it. They'll say there are brain states, not mental states, and they'll say they're different. I've seen so many presentations. It's the new big thing. It's called neuropsychology, which of course is where you study brain states. There's no psychology anymore. It's just chemistry in the brain. That's all it is. That's all it is. Now, I don't find that compelling, but to me, if I can argue that and compel them, that becomes evidence in this category of things that don't exist. So there are things that can't explain. Now, I think there are also things. So I don't find naturalism compelling. I think parts of reality like morality, numbers, a whole host of things cannot be made of matter and energy. I mean, what's the molecule for agony? How much does justice weigh? What's the molecule count? How many atoms are in the concept of mercy? That's just, to me, that's stupid. That's silly. These are value judgment, which every human in the world believes in, and we know that's real. You either break it or you live it. I mean, it's just as real as the law of gravity, but gravity is not made of matter and energy. So there's all kinds of parts of reality that aren't made of energy, and of course I do think consciousness is one of them.
So does the naturalist not think about those mercy and love and...
That's a great question.
I mean...
Well, as we talk about later on morality too, so what would they say to that? They're going to say, those do not exist. They're going to say those are social constructs that have been handed down from generations before when we lived more like herds people in the Saharas 15,000 years ago, Homo sapiens. As we evolved, it helped society and culture to get along. And so what's passed on now is this survival mechanism of being nice to our neighbor. And so we're not appealing to something. It's much more like a very deep ingrained social etiquette. That's what they're going to say. That evolutionary needs might make you. Richard Dawkins argued that the genes, by default, the DNA is selfish. It wants to die. He said, but we got to beat it. We have to make sure we're not selfish. Of course, he had to say that because Hitler said the opposite. He said our genes are basically selfish because we got to survive, so therefore conquer. Dawkins said that, therefore we don't do that. No. To which many people have said to Dawkins, then how do we overcome our genes deep embedded? And he goes, well, of course, you do it all the time. When you wear a condom, you don't have babies. It's the exact same thing. You overcome the whatever. But towards my response is that is not the same thing. That is absolutely not the same thing. My DNA response to how I perceive reality is very different from the behavioral choices I make. And that's why he's fallen under criticism. Well, David, they might say this. Well, say another thing they would say is, well, numbers, morality, mentions, I hear all that, but even if I don't know, they're going to figure it out. The science will figure it out.
It's a very selfish way of thinking for someone to just blame something else other than their own moral compass.
Very selfish. Yeah, and they're going to say, selfish or not selfish, it's true.
It's just the way I'm made.
Yeah, they're going to say that's right. That's right. Which what I like to say in response to that's the way I'm made, or no, that's the way evolution. To which, and if ever in a debate, I would say this. I would say, then why in the world are you trying to convince me I'm wrong and you're right? You're not right. You're just saying exactly what evolutionary desires are forcing you to say. Raise your hand if you give a rip what this advanced primate has to say in the crowd. Who cares? Somebody raise your hand. I would say, you only raise your hand because evolution made you do it. Raise your hand if you don't care. Look, who cares? This is all a facade. It's all DNA. We're just, as Richard Dawkins says, we're dancing to its tune. You don't really believe evolution is making you say that. That's a kind of determinism no one really believes in. Some do, but you don't really believe that. You think you're speaking truth. You think I'm wrong and you're right. You're trying to compel me. You don't really think your brain is making your mouth spout nonsense, and my brain is making it. There's no my brain, just the brain in this body, and that brain in the body, that's nonsense. You don't believe that. There is a you, and you're trying to make an argument.
I don't know how they feel like they even have a purpose if that's really the way they believe. It just sounds so hopeless. And
Then they asked Stephen Hawking, why do you get your purpose? And he says, I tell my kids that all the time. I say, make sure you find a job you love, because that's how you find your purpose. Be sure to love people and have babies or something like that. And I wrote about that in my book. And I said, if I were his son, I'd say, Dad, what evidence do you have that life gives me purpose? And I mean, went on and on and on. But so they'd say you make up a purpose. They would say you make it up. Whatever you do makes you fulfilled. You have a scientific whatever. But again, my response is, to me, that's silly. That's just a silly. My child, Julia can have a blast. She feels full purpose making that sandcastle on the beach. Jean, she can spend hours. And she goes, Daddy, look. And for those hours, she felt total purpose. And the next morning she comes out devastated that it magically disappeared. Now, that's exactly what we do on the speck of dust called Earth. But it's not for a few hours, it's a lifetime. Who gives a rip? Stephen Hawking's best calculations about how to live. Every medical advancement we make, every one of them will be irrelevant in under 40,000 years, because that's at most when the sun is going to expand so greatly that's going to burn off our atmosphere and it'll cook up the Earth. We've got roughly 40,000 years left at most, some say, if our resources don't run out before then. That's it. So every advancement we make on Earth is a big fat sandcastle. It's going to be over then. It's irrelevant. You say, David, wait, I can have purpose for that. Well, yeah. Is it a purpose? Someone builds a dam and it blocks out the river and the village lasts. And you go, that was very meaningful. That was good. Like solving cancer, good. And then 25 years, the big flood comes, bursts the dam, they all die. So in the long term, did it really matter? Well, no, it didn't matter at all. It helped them live longer, but it just didn't matter. In the end, it all died. That's all of us. We're all going to die. Our best advancements it's over. It's going to be, it won't last. It's just all, but you feel purpose in the time. You feel it. You feel meaning. Gangsters feel purpose. Rapists feel purpose. Murderers feel purpose. Liars, politicians, God bless them, they feel purpose.
That all goes together.
All that goes together. So we can feel it, but that's what they're going to say. They're going to say, well, I feel purpose. What difference does it make? My response to the difference is whether you feel it versus it really does matter significantly. Sandcastle is not a significant contribution. It doesn't seem like the way to me. Doesn't seem like to me. Okay, well, anyway, again, if an atheist right here, he or she would stand here and be very educated and give a response to everything I said, and I encourage you to go read those books. I gave you a couple things there. Let me introduce a few things, and then we'll be done for tonight. Just a few things. Hello. Well, I like to think about it this way. I like to think about it when I talk about the faith with people, now, not in 60 seconds, but in presentations, I say, it seems to me in my world, this is for David speaking, and this does not have to be for you. Chelsea might cover all of her facts and go, oh, man, I don't think about that way at all. That's cool. Okay. But the way I do it is, I have 3 layers of probability. 3 layers. What do I think I call them? The very probable, quite, what do I call them? Quite probable, the very probable, and then the virtually certain. And I like to think of it as 3 concentric circles, because I'm a nerd like that. So the middle VC is virtually certain, very probable, and then quite probable. That's on your handout, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, basically. So that's how I think about it. So in a normal conversation, if someone said, David, why do you think Jesus rose from the dead? I'm going to start with where they're at. I'm going to start where they're at. I'm not going to say, let me start back at the beginning at quite probable. No. That's they might be on letter L. Don't back up to B. Don't. You got them going. Good. But I'm just saying, in general, if someone said, explain from the very beginning, where would you start? Well, that's the way I think about these things. And of course, I'm trying to be as honest as I can because it's probable to me. To me, it's probable. I think there's a whole lot of things that make it probable that God is the best explanation. By God, I mean an all-powerful, moral, perfect, all-knowing God. So the textbook theism definition. A being that than which nothing can be greater conceived. Nothing can be greater conceived. It's the highest conceivable being. Their greatest conceivable being. A guy named Anselm made up that definition. The greatest conceivable being. Okay, just typical theism. And I think there are numerous things that make it very probable, or sometimes I say it this way, I think of at least 10 reasons. These are things, or another way you might think about it, and I explain, depending on who I'm talking to, I use different analogies. I'll say, quite probable, these are things that point. I think these are big fat arrows. I think of like in movies and cartoons, when they have all these different arrows, whatever it is, and Gene walks in on that corpse on the ground, and I go, what's the cause for it? And I go back, and I have a bunch of 10 little arrow signs. I go, point one arrow to Susan. I think maybe she did it. Another one to the chair. Another one to the temperature. But what if I line up 10 of them to Gene? And I go, there are 10 signs. I think she did it. Well, I have 10 things, I think. It's funny to me because she's so gentle, like, I would never kill anybody. But you don't know that. I'm just kidding. So here are 10 things I'll wrap up on. I'm not going to go through all 10. I'm just going to just start it very briefly and move on. I think God's the best explanation for why anything exists at all. There was a guy named Leibniz, a great German philosopher, Leibniz, who asked that eternal question that we should all ask: why is there something rather than nothing? This is a really good question to ask on a bus trip, an airplane, Thanksgiving coming up, Christmas time. Hey, Uncle.
I'm just picturing that going on.
There it is.
Yeah, my house.
I tell you that Trump, speaking of Trump, let me ask you a question. Why do you think something exists rather than nothing? However that tie-in works. No matter what your belief is, if you think about it, that's a good conversation starter. I mean, think, I don't understand the question. I mean, really though, really, why is there anything? I mean, why in the world are we here at all? Not just humans. Why is there a universe? Why is anything here? They might go to number 2 in a second. Well, it had a beginning and came from... No, I mean, anything in the first place, no matter what this universe would have looked like. I'm not talking about the one we're in, just big picture. Do you really think we had to be here, that the universe must exist? Why is there something rather than nothing at all? I think it's a good question. And there's nothing in the universe There's no reason for me to think that we must be here, that we have necessary existence. I'm going to teach you a word here you might not have ever heard before. Aseity. Aseity means something has necessary. It exists necessarily. It exists. That is to say, it must exist. It has aseity. It exists necessarily. That is, it is logically impossible for it not to exist. That's what the average theist thinks about God. God has aseity, and only God. By the way, that's the Christian view. Only God has aseity. God the Father, Son, and Spirit. Well, what's the opposite, or what's everybody else? We have the word contingent. Contingent. Contingent means it doesn't necessarily exist, right? It exists because, ... It exists because something else brought it into existence. You and I in this room, and I want to wrap up, we are all contingent beings. You came from your mama. I'm assuming you all did. I'm trying to get out of the way of the board. But we are all contingent beings. None of us necessarily exist. None of us have aseity. None of us have aseity. Right? Our pets don't have aseity. The trees don't have aseity. These tables didn't have aseity. They don't necessarily exist. They were built. These chairs were built. The carpet was constructed. Well, go back further. What about the mountains? Do the mountains have to? No, the mountains were formed because the crust. What about the earth? No, that wasn't. That was formed probably some other thing, the Big Bang. Well, that didn't have. The farther back you go, the question is, I see no reason at all. I said I. It's like Texas. Oh my goodness. Did you hear that?
Wow.
Man, that just came right out. I'm sorry, Lord. Let's pray. Heavenly Father. I think there's no reason to think at all that the universe or any reality, whatever universes there are, necessarily exists. I see no reason. The smallest building blocks of the universe, beneath atoms, all the way down to quarks and leptons, these are the small, or beneath that string theorist, that's the bottom of the barrel, if those exist. My question is, why would strings be necessary? Why can the universe be made of styrofoam or something else, or made of light bulbs? I mean, why would it be? It could be anything. Those are silly examples, or another molecule, or another something else. Why those things? What is it about those things that exist in the first? Why? And people, well, they just do. And you can believe that. I personally just don't. I don't see why those building blocks have to be that way. I think they're contingent. I think the reality doesn't have to be here. I think it came from somewhere. There's a reason why it came from somewhere. If you're a narrow naturalist, the answer is, where'd the fishbowl come from? They're going to say, there is no, it's just here. It's always been here. And it's a dumb question to ask otherwise. I don't think it's dumb. I'm not fish that goes, I wonder where, is that the limits? When I bump up against right there, and it feels like something we're going to call glass. What is that? Because glass isn't in the water, but that material's, where do you think? It just is. Stop asking dumb questions, David. And don't say someone made it, because you're being lazy. That's what they're going to say. So, number one, I think God is the best explanation for why anything exists. David, you're bringing a God, you're smuggling God. I'm not. I just think he's the best explanation. Good. Number one, we're going to stop there. Don't worry, we got a few weeks, okay? Don't be worried. Week one was a lot of intro on purpose.
We have a good foundation.
I want a good foundation, that's right. Any question or comments for me? Anything at all, really? Don't be afraid.
Are we going to have to write a thesis after this? Or?
No, but you'll be quizzed. I was going to do a pre and post test. I'm just kidding. I forgot to scare everybody off. Yeah.
I'm not coming.
I see, I told you, I just scared everybody off.
Thank goodness for the post test.
That's right. And if you'll notice in the handouts, you have almost every note. That's on purpose, so you don't have to write feverishly. Any extra stuff I'm throwing out, like Leibniz and whatever, that's just for you. But your handout, what you have right now, is all the major points I'm going to make, the major ones. So that way, I want to be sure you had it down. You didn't have to worry about it. If you missed a week, you don't have to. So I hope you'll listen. I'm going to keep posting this online. It'll be on the website, and you can always re-listen to it if you want. And I always try to be encouraging. And please understand, you don't have to memorize all this. Like with the facts, you really don't. I'm trying to really, you don't. If that person comes to you as a very, very educated atheist and just wants to get at you, you're like, I don't know what to say. Just learn from it. You humbly ask those questions. So tell me again what your view is. You don't have to defend anything. Well, I think blah, blah, blah. Why do you think that? You're just listening to their view, and they go, why do you believe in all that stuff too? Well, I do, but why do you believe? Well, I don't know, it's a good question. Let me go do some research. So you don't have to memorize all this on the spot. And the odds are a lot of you are not going to come across a very, very educated atheist anyway. But if you do, there are some people they can write to and read from. But my hope is that you feel more encouraged, more enlightened. You've been exposed to this. If you hear on CNN News or every single Christmas and Easter when someone comes out later on when we talk about the Bible, you can't trust any of it. We're going to talk about all of that. I want you to hear that stuff and go, oh, we covered all that. I'm not scared of that at all anymore. Nope, makes sense to me. Especially being a new Christian. I want you to go and say, there's reason to think this makes sense. Christianity is not a blind, dumb, idiotic faith. It's really not.
Yeah.
It's really, really not.
Kind of like the timing of this happening and now you being in this room and what you're going to learn, what we're all going to learn.
Amen.
Not necessarily coincidence, maybe.